She didn't come home that night. I waited. Then I followed her. What I saw shattered me. She was with him. The man I'd trusted. The one she'd sworn she'd never betray me for. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part? She didn't even try to hide it. I've always believed that some people go their entire lives without truly knowing the people closest to them. Not until something breaks. Something real. It's like a crack forming in a seemingly perfect surface. I never saw it coming, though. And when it happened, I was the last one to know. My wife, Emily, and I had been together for years, since high school. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was good. People around us always said we were the perfect couple, and for the most part, I believed it. We had our ups and downs, but who doesn't? That's what marriage is about. But then something changed. It started subtly, like any crack does, small and unnoticeable. Emily had been staying late at work a lot more lately. Deadlines, she'd say, more things to focus on. I didn't think much of it at first, until the distance grew. She'd come home late, and her phone was always hidden, always attached to her hand. One afternoon, while we were having lunch, I saw her texting under the table. It wasn't the usual openness I was used to. Her hand moved so quickly, so defensively, to hide the screen. That's when the thought hit me. What if there was more going on? I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I wasn't that guy, but it was eating away at me, so I decided to follow her one night. She said she was going out with friends, but this time, I kept my distance, watching as she drove away. She took a turn I didn't expect, leading to a dimly lit street. I parked, heart pounding in my chest. That's when I saw him. A taxi driver. He opened the door for her. They exchanged laughs, leaned in too close. My stomach dropped. My wife. With him. A taxi driver. I sat there for what felt like hours. My mind raced. What was I seeing? Was I imagining things? I had to know more, but part of me was terrified to find out. As I drove home, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, I realized something. I didn't recognize her anymore. The woman I married was slipping away, and I had no idea who was responsible for making her forget about us. The next few days felt like I was living in a fog. I kept replaying that scene in my head. Emily with him, laughing, too close, too comfortable. I couldn't shake it. It gnawed at me, eating away at the peace I thought we had. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted to, needed to, but there was something inside me, something dark, telling me to wait. I wasn't ready to face whatever reality I might uncover. So, I kept playing it cool, acting like everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. Every day, I watched her more closely. She'd come home late, smell faintly of cologne that wasn't hers, and her phone would be glued to her hand. I couldn't ignore it. I wasn't crazy. Something was wrong. The tension between us grew. At dinner, she'd be there, but not really there. She'd smile, laugh at my jokes, but her eyes were distant, like she was somewhere else. I caught her glancing at her phone under the table, the same way she had that day. I had to know. So, I took a deep breath and did something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. I knew it was wrong, invasive, but I had to see. There it was. A conversation that made my blood run cold. The texts weren't long, but they didn't need to be. There was no mistaking it. The tone, the flirtation, the intimacy. And there, at the top of the thread, was his name, the taxi driver. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of disbelief and rage wash over me. This wasn't just a one-time thing. It was happening. I didn't know how long it had been going on, but it didn't matter. The truth was clear. Emily was having an affair. I wanted to scream, confront her right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I put the phone back in her bag and walked away, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do next. I was crushed, devastated, but I knew I couldn't confront her without a plan. Not yet. So, I did what any man in my position would do. I started to plan. I would wait. I'd gather more information, more proof. I had to know everything before I could make the next move. But deep down, I knew things would never be the same again. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. The days blurred together, each one dragging as I tried to figure out what to do. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd found on her phone. The way she and the taxi driver spoke to each other, like they had some inside joke that I wasn't a part of. It was like my whole world was being pulled out from under me, and I was powerless to stop it. I became a ghost in my own house. I went through the motions, doing what I had to do, but I was a shell of the person I used to be. I couldn't look at Emily the same way anymore. Every smile she gave me felt like a lie. Every touch was a reminder that she was no longer the woman I thought she was. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, but I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. So, I kept my distance, observing her more closely than ever. The late nights continued, but now I was aware of the exact time she would leave, when she'd get the texts, and how she'd react when she thought I wasn't looking. There was a coldness to her that wasn't there before. And then came the weekend. She told me she was going to visit a friend out of town for a couple of days. I didn't question it. I knew better by now. She packed a bag, kissed me goodbye, and drove off. I stood there, watching her go, and it felt like I was watching the last shred of my marriage slip away. Once she was gone, I did what I'd been planning. I followed her. This time, I was careful. I stayed far behind, keeping to the shadows, making sure she didn't know I was there. She drove to a different part of town, an area I didn't recognize. I parked a few blocks away and watched her walk into a small, unassuming building. My heart raced. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I was desperate for answers. I waited and waited. For over an hour, nothing. Then, the door opened, and there he was. The taxi driver. He greeted her with a smile, and before I knew it, they were walking away together. They didn't notice me. I could feel the weight of my own heartbeat in my chest, but I couldn't move. I stayed there, watching them until they disappeared around the corner. It was all the confirmation I needed. I drove back home in a daze, my mind racing. What did I do now? Confront her? Or wait for her to come back, knowing she would lie her way out of it, just like she always did? I couldn't keep this up anymore. The waiting, the silence, the constant fear that something worse was coming. I had the answers, but the truth felt like a weight pressing down on me, and I was suffocating under it. I knew I had to confront Emily, but I didn't know how. She came home late that night, just like she always did. Her eyes were tired, and she gave me the same half-hearted smile that had become so familiar. But I saw something else in her eyes. A flicker of nervousness, something she couldn't hide. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "How was your night?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her, trying to make sense of what was happening, of who she was now. The woman I married, the woman I trusted, was standing in front of me, and I barely recognized her. My pulse quickened. I was so angry, but I couldn't find the words. I stood up slowly, crossing the room until I was right in front of her. She looked up, confused, maybe even a little frightened, but I couldn't care about that anymore. "You want to see him again, didn't you?" My voice was low, but firm. Her face went pale. She didn't say anything, just froze. But that was enough. I already knew. "I saw you with him. The taxi driver. You can't deny it," I said, my voice shaking now, not with fear, but with the weight of everything I was holding back. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just stood there, looking at me with wide eyes, the guilt written all over her face. She didn't have to say anything. I already knew. "How long, Emily?" I asked, my voice breaking as the anger and hurt surged forward. "How long has this been going on?" She took a step back, her eyes darting to the floor. Don't lie to me," I snapped, cutting her off. "I already know. You've been sneaking around behind my back for months. How long were you planning to keep this from me?" She didn't respond immediately. The silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then, finally, she whispered, "I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," I said, my tone bitter. "You've done exactly that." I waited for more, an explanation, an apology, anything, but all I got was silence. And in that silence, I realized something. Emily wasn't sorry. Not really. She was sorry she got caught. I turned away from her, unable to look at her anymore. I didn't know what to do. My marriage, my whole life, felt like it was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The silence between us after that moment felt suffocating. Emily stood there, still in the doorway, her face pale and trembling, while I felt a cold numbness spread through my body. It was as if I was watching the life I'd built unravel in slow motion, and I couldn't stop it. She didn't move for a long time, and I didn't look at her. My mind was racing, but I couldn't find the clarity I needed. I had so many questions, so much rage, but at the same time, I didn't want to hear her explanations. What could she say? She'd already said it all with her actions. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh. "Sorry? Is that supposed to make this better?" I shook my head, my anger flaring up again. You've been lying to me for months, Emily. How long were you planning to keep this up? How long were you going to keep pretending everything was fine? She stepped forward, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to fall for him, but I did. I don't know how it happened. I was just lonely. Lonely. The word hit me like a punch in the gut. I hadn't been perfect, but I had tried. I'd always tried to be there for her, to make our relationship work. And this was what I got in return? You think I'm some fool, don't you? I said, turning to face her at last. You think I didn't see the way you acted when you came home, when you were so distant, so secretive. I knew something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. Tears streamed down her face now. She reached out, but I stepped back, unwilling to let her touch me. I don't know what to say. I never wanted to hurt you. You did, I said, the words cold and final. You already did. She looked up at me, desperation in her eyes. Please, just let me explain. Please don't leave. Leave. The word echoed in my mind, but I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. How could I stay with someone who had broken me like this? How could I trust her again after everything? I don't know if I can, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I need time, Emily. I need to think. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, crying in the hallway. As I sat down in the living room, I realized something. This was it. The beginning of the end. I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not after this. I spent the next few days in a haze. The house felt emptier than it ever had. The silence almost unbearable. Emily and I barely spoke. When we did, it was strained, the weight of what had happened hanging between us like a wall I couldn't climb over. She tried to talk, to explain herself, but I couldn't hear it. The words didn't matter anymore. I couldn't trust her, not like I used to. I kept replaying everything in my head. The late nights, the secrecy, the way she acted like nothing was wrong. And then that moment when I followed her, seeing her with him, laughing, leaning in too close. It burned. It was seared into my memory, a wound that wouldn't heal. She'd asked me for time, for patience, to let her fix it. But how could I? How could I trust someone who had done this to me? Someone who had lied, who had gone behind my back for months, and thought she could get away with it? But still, I couldn't bring myself to leave right away. I told myself I needed time to think, but maybe I was just too scared to face the reality that my marriage was over. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things had gone so wrong. How had we gone from that perfect couple everyone admired to this, strangers under the same roof? It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the deception. Emily had become someone else, someone I didn't recognize. I'd watched her change right in front of me, and I hadn't even realized it. She had her own world now, one that didn't include me. I was just the guy who paid the bills, the guy who was always there when she needed him, but never the one she truly wanted. She tried to reach out again, a touch on my shoulder, a soft, "Can we talk?" But every time she did, I pulled away. I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. I didn't want to hear about how she was lonely or how things just happened. It didn't matter. I kept my distance. I stayed in the guest room, not because I wanted to, but because it was easier than pretending everything was fine. The more I stayed away, the more I realized how little we had left. I couldn't fix this. Not with words. Not with time. And deep down, I knew something else. This wasn't just about her affair anymore. It was about me. About who I had become. The guy who accepted the lies, who let himself be blind to the truth. I wasn't that guy anymore. It's funny how silence can speak louder than any words ever could. For the past few days, Emily and I had lived in that silence. The kind of silence that fills every corner of the house. A heavy, suffocating presence that made even the smallest sounds feel like explosions. The distance between us had grown so vast. I felt like we were living in two completely different worlds. She kept trying to talk to me, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Each attempt from her felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. The warmth between us, the trust, the shared history. We had built all that together, and now it felt like it was slipping through my fingers, just like sand. I watched her, but I couldn't recognize her anymore. Her hair, once so vibrant, now looked dull. Her smile, once so comforting, felt hollow. The woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, wasn't standing in front of me anymore. She was a stranger. And maybe I was, too. The tension in the air was unbearable, and it reached a breaking point that Saturday night. She came into the guest room where I'd been staying, her footsteps tentative, as if she wasn't sure how to approach me anymore. She was holding her phone in her hands. The screen lit up with a message that I couldn't see, but the anxiety in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice quiet but desperate. I didn't move, just stared at her. I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't hear it. What more was there to say? I had already seen enough, learned enough, and honestly, I was past the point of no return. "Please," she said, stepping closer, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up, but I don't want to lose you. I can fix this. I will fix this." I didn't say anything. I didn't know how to say what I was feeling without it sounding cold or cruel. The truth was, I wasn't sure I even wanted her to fix it anymore. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything else, too. The lies. The years of pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. She looked down at the floor, then back at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I love you. I always have. I made a huge mistake." The words stung, but not in the way they once would have. They felt empty now, like echoes of something that used to matter. She was asking me to forgive her, to let her back in, but I wasn't sure if I could. "I can't," I said softly, shaking my head. The weight of the decision hit me like a ton of bricks. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." The finality of those words settled between us, and for the first time in days, there was nothing left to say. The air was thick with the unspoken truth. Our marriage was over. She didn't fight me on it. She just stood there, staring at me, tears running down her face. And as much as it hurt to see her like that, I knew deep down I was already gone. I didn't need to see her with him anymore. I didn't need to hear more of her apologies. The truth was, I had checked out long before that night. The days that followed felt like a blur. Emily gave me space, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, I was able to breathe. There was no pretending, no forced conversations. We lived in separate corners of the house, existing but not truly living. It was as if the world had frozen around us, and we were the only ones still moving. I didn't know what to do next. Should I leave? Should I stay? The thought of leaving was terrifying, starting over, finding somewhere to live, figuring out what I'd do with my life. The thought of staying, though, was even worse. How could I live in the same house with her, knowing what she had done? The betrayal was too deep. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything. The lies, the secrecy, the trust that had been shattered. It wasn't just her that I was angry with anymore. It was me too. How had I let it go on for so long? How had I let her pull away without even noticing? Had I been so focused on my own life that I missed the signs? I couldn't answer that. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living like this. Emily tried to talk to me once or twice, but each time I shut her out. There was nothing left to say. We'd said it all already. I wasn't sure if she could ever understand the depth of the hurt she had caused, or if I could ever forgive her. But what really hit me, what really shook me to my core, was how different I felt. I wasn't the same person I was before I found out. I wasn't the same person I was before her betrayal. She had changed me, and I couldn't go back to who I was. I had become someone else in the process, a version of myself who could no longer ignore the truth, no longer ignore the way I had been treated. One night, after days of silence, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me. Emily had been out, probably doing what she had been doing for weeks now, and for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. I had to make a decision, once and for all. Could I rebuild from this? Could we ever find our way back? Or was this the end? She walked in a little later, but I didn't look up. I didn't want her to see my face, to know what I was thinking. "Are you going to say something?" she asked, her voice wavering. I can't keep pretending like everything's okay when it isn't. I looked at her then, and for the first time, I saw her clearly. There was no anger, no pain in my heart anymore, just the cold, hard truth. I was done. "I don't know what we're doing anymore, Emily," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can keep living like this." And just like that, the weight of the decision was made. There was no going back. I hadn't realized how much weight I was carrying until I said the words aloud. "I don't know if I can keep living like this." It felt like a confession, one I hadn't wanted to make, but had no choice but to speak. Emily didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, eyes wide, her face pale, like she was still trying to process what I'd just said. Then, her lips parted, and the floodgates opened. "Please don't do this," she pleaded, stepping toward me. I love you. I want to make this right. We can fix this. I promise. The words were familiar, like a script she had rehearsed in her head. She'd said them before, and I'd listened before, but not now. Not anymore. I had nothing left to give. Emily. I began, but my voice caught in my throat. I didn't want to hurt her more than I already had, but I couldn't lie to myself either. You broke something in me, and I don't know if I can fix it. The silence between us felt endless. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the absence of hope, of the trust we once had. She was still standing there, desperately clinging to something that wasn't there anymore. I could see the fear in her eyes, the way she was trying to convince herself that we could somehow repair this. But I knew better. I can't keep doing this, I said again, more firmly this time. I don't know who you are anymore. And I don't think you know who I am either. We've lost each other, Emily. And no amount of talking is going to change that. I watched her face crumple. For a moment, I felt a twinge of guilt, maybe even regret, but it was fleeting. The pain was too deep now. The betrayal had become too much for me to bear. I had spent years giving her my trust, and she had handed it to someone else without a second thought. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking, but the tears in her eyes couldn't make me change my mind. They were just tears, and they didn't fix anything. I stood up slowly, not sure if I was steady enough to walk, but I did. I walked out of that room without looking back. She didn't follow me. She didn't try to stop me. I don't know if she knew in that moment that I was done, or if she was just too broken to fight anymore. But as I walked down the hallway, I could feel the finality of it sinking in. This was it. The end of the road. The end of us. I didn't pack my things right away. I couldn't. Not yet. There were too many memories, too many years of life we had built together. It was too much to process all at once. But I knew the time was coming. It was only a matter of when. I spent the night in the guest room again, staring at the ceiling, feeling the emptiness fill the space between us. The truth was clear now. No matter how much I wanted to hold on to the good parts of us, the damage was too deep. The marriage I thought I had was over, and I couldn't save it. Not anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, the desperation, the sorrow. But more than that, I felt a coldness creeping in, settling deep in my bones. I knew what had to be done. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but I could feel the weight lifting as I thought about it more. I needed to leave. Leaving wasn't as simple as packing a bag and walking out the door. It wasn't about just physically leaving. It was about leaving behind years of shared history, memories that once made me feel whole. I had to turn my back on the life I thought I would always have. But as I lay there in the dim light of the guest room, I realized that the life I thought we had wasn't real anymore. It had been shattered, and no amount of hoping, no amount of time, could fix it. The next morning, Emily was already up when I came downstairs. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, but her expression was different. It was more resigned than hopeful, as if she had already prepared herself for the reality I was about to deliver. I've been thinking, she said softly, her voice shaky. If you want to go, I won't stop you. Those words hit me harder than anything she'd said before. She wasn't fighting me anymore. She had already accepted it, the same way I had. That final spark of hope I'd been holding on to flickered and died in that instant. I need to go, I said quietly, nodding. My voice felt thick with the weight of what I was about to do. I don't think I can live here anymore. She looked down at her hands, then up at me again, her face pale. I understand. I grabbed a bag, stuffing only what I could carry in it. It felt strange, packing up my life in such a small space. I had built a home here, a life with her, and now it all felt so hollow, so empty. Where will you go? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know yet, I replied, zipping up the bag. I'll figure it out. I didn't look at her as I walked toward the door. I couldn't. If I did, I might have turned around. I might have stayed, tried to find some way to make it work. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. I needed to leave. For my own sanity, I needed to start over. Before I left, I turned to her one last time. I'm sorry, Emily, I said, my voice barely audible. I really thought we could make it. But we're not who we were anymore. She nodded, her face crumpling again. She didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. I walked out the door without looking back. The moment I stepped outside, it hit me, the freedom. It wasn't relief, not yet. That would come later. For now, It was just the overwhelming weight of knowing I was no longer bound to the life I'd been living. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what I was going to do or where I was going. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. And that was all I could ask for. The first few days after I left were the hardest. I moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town, not because it was the best place, but because it was the only place that felt like it was mine. There were no memories here, no traces of the life I'd shared with Emily. It was empty, just four walls and a floor that echoed with my footsteps. But that emptiness was something I needed, something I craved. I didn't unpack much. I set my bag on the bed, looked around at the bare furniture, and realized I had no idea what to do next. My world had been turned upside down, and now I was floating, untethered. The only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't go back. Not to her. Not to that life. It was gone. The silence of the apartment was both a relief and a curse. It was peaceful, yes, but it also reminded me of what I had lost. There were no arguments, no secrets to uncover, no late-night texts. But there was also no laughter, no warmth, no shared dinners. Everything was quieter, emptier. The days blurred into each other. I spent my time working, trying to distract myself from the heaviness in my chest. I threw myself into routines, waking up, going to the gym, eating, and going to bed. My mind, though, never stopped. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. I heard her voice in my head, apologizing, pleading. But I had made my decision. There was no going back. A week later, I ran into someone at the grocery store, a woman I used to know in passing. Her name was Sarah, a friendly acquaintance from a few years back. We hadn't spoken in a long time, but seeing her there, smiling, reminded me that life still went on. She asked me how I was doing, and for a moment, I considered telling her the truth, the full, ugly story. But something stopped me. Instead, I said, I'm getting by. It's been a tough time. She didn't push, just smiled and nodded. And for a moment, I thought I saw something in her eyes. Maybe it was sympathy, or maybe it was curiosity. Either way, it was the first time in days I felt like I wasn't completely invisible. It felt strange, connecting with someone else, even in such a small, fleeting way. But it also reminded me that I wasn't alone. I didn't have to stay buried under this weight forever. I could rebuild. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. I returned to my apartment that evening, opened the window to let in the cool air, and sat down. I thought about the life I had left behind, the woman I had once loved so fiercely. And while I still felt that sting, that ache of betrayal, I also realized something important. I was going to be okay. Not right now, but I would be. For the first time since I left, I didn't feel entirely lost. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routine. I settled into my new life in the apartment, adjusting to the quiet and the solitude. I'd always been someone who enjoyed my own space, but this was different. This wasn't peace, it was absence. The silence was deafening, and every moment without her felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. I spent more time at the gym, trying to drown out the lingering thoughts in my head. Work was a welcome distraction, but it wasn't enough. The nights were the hardest. When the world outside grew still, my thoughts would creep back in, dragging me into a spiral of regret and anger. What if I'd done something differently? What if I hadn't left? What if I'd forgiven her? But deep down, I knew that what I had done was the only thing I could do. There was no going back to that. There was no undoing the betrayal, no returning to a life of half-truths and empty promises. Emily had made her choice, and I had made mine. It was one Thursday evening when everything shifted. I was walking back to my apartment after another long day, lost in my own thoughts, when I heard a familiar voice call my name. Hey, you. I turned around, startled, and froze when I saw her. Sarah, the same woman from the grocery store. She was standing a few feet away, a tentative smile on her face, her blonde hair catching the last light of the setting sun. Sarah, I said, surprised to see her again so soon. Hey, what's up? She walked up to me, looking a little more casual than the last time we spoke. I didn't expect to run into you again, but I'm glad I did. How've you been? Her eyes lingered on me for a second, and I could tell she was being sincere. I hesitated, unsure if I should share anything. I wasn't ready to tell someone the whole story, not yet. But something in Sarah's warmth made me want to. She wasn't like the others, asking probing questions or offering empty sympathy. She was just there. I'm Getting through it, I said, the words feeling hollow. It's been a rough time, to be honest. She nodded, as if she understood. You know, if you ever want to talk, or just get out of your head for a bit, I'd be happy to hang out. I know a good coffee place nearby. It's nothing fancy, but it's quiet. I felt a twinge of uncertainty. I wasn't ready to jump into anything new, especially not after everything I'd just been through. But something in Sarah's invitation felt different. It wasn't a pity invite. It wasn't someone trying to fix me. It was just a simple offer, one person reaching out to another. I don't know, I said, feeling the weight of my own hesitation. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that kind of thing yet. She smiled, but it wasn't forced. No pressure, she said, taking a step back. I just thought I'd ask. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. I nodded, my chest tight as I watched her walk away. I stood there for a moment, torn between wanting to reach out and just feeling like I wasn't ready for anything. But as I turned and walked toward my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a sign. A reminder that maybe there was something beyond the walls of this apartment, beyond the pain. Maybe there was hope. The encounter with Sarah stayed with me longer than I expected. It wasn't much, just an invitation for coffee, but it felt like a door had cracked open, offering a sliver of hope. For the first time in weeks, it reminded me that life wasn't over, that I wasn't doomed to live in this empty space forever. But I still wasn't ready. Not after everything with Emily. The rawness of the betrayal was too fresh, and I couldn't bring myself to trust anyone again. Still, Sarah's offer lingered in my mind. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. Days passed, and I found myself wrestling with the thought of reaching out to her. I told myself I needed more time, more space. But the truth was, I was scared of moving on, scared of being hurt again. Yet, I knew that if I kept hiding from life, I'd stay stuck. One Friday afternoon, I walked back to my apartment, exhausted, the weight of silence heavier than usual. The quiet of my place wasn't offering me peace anymore. It was amplifying the emptiness. I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I pulled out my phone and stared at Sarah's contact. With a deep breath, I sent a simple message. Hey, it's me. I've been thinking about your offer. Coffee sounds good. It was a small step, but it felt huge. The moment I hit send, a mix of relief and nervousness washed over me. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew I had to try. She replied quickly. Great. How about tomorrow at 2? I'll meet you at that cafe we talked about. The next day, I walked into the cozy cafe Sarah had mentioned, feeling both out of place and oddly hopeful. There she was, sitting by the window, smiling as she saw me approach. Her smile wasn't forced, it was genuine, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely invisible. Thanks for meeting me, I said as I sat down. No problem, she said, settling into her chair. I'm really glad you came. We spent the next hour chatting about simple things, work, life, anything that didn't require diving into my personal mess. But when she asked, "How are you really doing?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to pour everything out, but I wasn't ready. I'm better, I said, taking it day by day. Her nod was understanding. That's all we can do. By the time we left, I felt lighter. It wasn't a big step, but it was enough. For the first time, I didn't feel completely alone. The days following that coffee with Sarah felt like a subtle shift. I hadn't expected much, just a casual meet-up to get my mind off things, but it turned out to be exactly what I needed. I'd spent so much time drowning in my own thoughts, trapped in the aftermath of everything with Emily, that I'd forgotten what it was like to have a conversation that wasn't weighed down by guilt, anger, or regret. Sarah didn't push me. She didn't try to fix me, didn't ask for more than I was willing to give. She just listened, and that, in itself, was a gift I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I started to look forward to our conversations, the small moments where I could connect with someone without the baggage of my past. We'd talk about everything, books, movies, random observations, and I found myself laughing, even if it was just for a moment. It wasn't that I had forgotten about the pain of my marriage falling apart. It was that, for a while, I didn't have to think about it. Still, there were times when it all came rushing back. The silence in my apartment would be louder, the emptiness more suffocating. Emily's face would appear in my mind, followed by the memory of her with him, the taxi driver. The anger would flare up again, and the hurt would feel just as fresh as the day I walked out the door. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. Slowly, I was starting to feel like myself again, like the man I used to be before all of this. I was no longer just the guy who had been betrayed, the guy who had lost everything. I was becoming someone who could move forward, who could live again. One evening, after a quiet dinner alone, I got a text from Sarah. "Hey, I found this cool new restaurant I've been wanting to try. You up for it this weekend?" It was a simple thing, but as I read her message, I realized something. I was looking forward to seeing her again. Not because I was trying to fill a void or find a distraction, but because I was beginning to enjoy her company. I was starting to rediscover the joy of connecting with another person. Maybe this was the first step toward a new chapter. Maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought. The weekend came quicker than I expected. I was standing in front of my closet, staring at the few clothes I had unpacked into the tiny apartment, wondering what the hell I was doing. I hadn't been on a proper date since I was with Emily, and the idea of spending time with someone else, someone new, felt both exciting and terrifying. But as I put on a shirt I felt good in, a part of me realized that I wasn't doing this because I was trying to replace the past. I was doing it because I was ready to step out of the shadows of the life I had left behind. I met Sarah at the restaurant she'd suggested. It was quiet, intimate, nothing fancy, but the kind of place where the atmosphere felt comfortable, easy. She was already there when I arrived, a smile spreading across her face as she waved me over. I could feel the nervousness inside me dissipate as I walked toward her. "Hey," I said, taking a seat across from her. "Hey, I'm glad you came," Sarah said, her eyes lighting up. "This place has the best risotto, by the way. You're going to love it." We didn't talk about anything heavy, nothing to do with my past or her life. It was just two people enjoying a meal together. We laughed, we shared stories, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't realized I was missing. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself more present than I had been in a long time. Sarah wasn't trying to fix me, and I wasn't trying to fix myself in front of her. We were just existing. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't the world that had changed, but me. I was changing. When we walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air hit my face, and I felt an overwhelming sense of possibility. I was no longer a man defined by his past. I was someone who could choose what came next. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. As we said our goodbyes, Sarah smiled at me. "Thanks for tonight. I had a really good time." "Me too," I said, my voice steady, not carrying the weight it once had. "Maybe we can do this again sometime?" She nodded, a glint in her eyes. "I'd like that." I watched her walk away, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel empty. I didn't feel lost. I felt like I was walking into a new chapter, a chapter one was ready to write. Maybe the past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined who I was. I was learning to let go, and in doing so, I was learning to live again.